Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our webinar as we present your 30-day plan to end your struggle for data. My name is Melanie Marks and I'm the Director of Demand Generation for Snowflake Computing, and I will be today's moderator. First, I would like to thank our sponsor and technology partner, Looker. Looker is a complete data platform that offers data analytics and business insights to every department and easily integrates into applications to get data directly into the decision-making process. The company is powering data-driven cultures at more than 800 industry-leading and innovative companies, such as Sony, Amazon, The Economist, Kohler, Etsy, Lyft, and Kickstarter, to name a few. And hosting today's event is Snowflake Computing. Snowflake provides the only data warehouse built for the cloud, one designed to deliver the performance simplicity and concurrency needed to solve today's data analytics challenges. So before we begin, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. Each attendee is in listen-only mode for the duration of our presentation, and we do encourage you to engage with us through our question and answer widget that you'll see at the bottom of the webinar platform, and we'll be taking as many questions as possible. If we don't address your question directly, we'll be sure to follow up with you individually. Also, we'll be sure to send around the presentation after today's webinar, and it is, again, being recorded, so you'll be seeing that as well within 24 hours. And we do have some great resources that we'd like to go ahead and make sure that you have a chance to review. We have some great joint Snowflake and Looker data sheets, white papers, case studies, just to name a few. And I'd like to go ahead and get started by introducing today's presenters. Ross Perez, Director of Product Marketing for Snowflake Computing. Ross is charged with leading the discussion about analytics, big data, and cloud data warehousing amongst Snowflake's customers, partners, and the marketplace as a whole. And I'd like to welcome Norris Haddad, Director of Technology Alliances from Looker. And Norris works with Looker's top ecosystem partners on creating deep product integrations and alignment and communicating that joint value proposition to our mutual customers and prospects. Gentlemen, welcome, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to pass the presentation over to Ross from Snowflake. Ross, take it away.
Well, thanks, Melanie, and we're so happy to have you guys here today and to talk a little bit about ending the struggle for data. Now, before we get started, I think it's really important to get a sense of where everybody in the room is. So if you wouldn't mind, you can see we have a poll question loaded up on your screen, and you can interact with that directly. And what we'd like to know is, where is your organization on the path to ending your struggle for data? It could be that you're kind of already got everything under control, and that would be the very top option where you have your data perfected. Maybe you have most of the things that you need to do are being served by your data platform. That might be the second option. Perhaps you need a pretty significant amount of work before you're where you want to be, and that might be the third option. And if you're just getting started and the struggle for data is really real for you, then that might be the last option. So go ahead and click on one of those options and click Submit, and let's see where everyone is on this. All right, so it seems like most everyone, about 50% of the respondents, feel pretty well about their data platform, but there's still some work to be done, and that's actually perfect. And I'm really happy to see that almost everybody, or there's nobody in the room that is really struggling with their data and analytics platform. But luckily, it seems like there's room for improvement with everybody, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Just give you some ideas for ways to improve the struggles that you might be having for data. Now, what are some struggles that we see very often? Well, there's 4 that our customers have told us they really identified with before they came onto the Snowflake platform. So these are pretty common data struggles. The first one is data loading, so just getting data where you need it to be. The second one is data integration, actually taking the data that you have in multiple different locations and trying to make sense of it. Analytics, actually taking the data that's been loaded into your data warehouse or data systems and then finding the answers that you need through your BI tool. And then the last one is collaboration, actually discussing and finding answers with the data that you have in your organization with the rest of the people that are involved with it. Today, our goal is to talk about those common data struggles and how Snowflake can address them. Then we'll give you a practical 30-day plan to actually start ending your data struggles using Snowflake. And Nuris from Looker will continue the process of discussing, addressing the data struggles with a detailed look into fixing common analytics struggles with Looker. Okay, let's get started. So first we're going to look at common data struggles, and the very first one is data loading. If you're unable to get data into your data warehouse or into the database that you're using to analyze data, then it can be a big problem if you're actually trying to use that data in your day-to-day analytics. There are three common things that the struggle to load data really personifies itself as. So the first one is having disparate data to load. Organizations today are using more than just standard relational data. They have semi-structured data that's being generated from applications and web data, and often this comes in JSON or XML or Avro or Parquet format, and trying to get that data into a data warehouse, a traditional data warehouse, is very difficult. And actually, even data warehouses that are in the cloud-washed databases, we would call them, are often very incapable of dealing with multiple different types of semi-structured data. And even if you are able to load it into one of those databases or data warehouses, it can be difficult to interact with. Because of this, people often put their data in two separate systems. They might have a NoSQL or Hadoop tool for semi-structured data, and they may have a standard data warehouse for relational data. Now, the other struggle that people often can run into when they're loading their data is with capacity planning. Even if you have your data in a format that is usable for your data warehouse, you still have to plan ahead and have time that you won't have to worry about contention on the data warehouse to load the data. In other words, if you're loading your data while you're also simultaneously hitting the cluster with queries and transformation, then it can create a bad experience for everyone using the data warehouse. Because of this, oftentimes people will be loading their data late at night. The other issue is that when you have this problem of needing to load data and avoiding other people, then you have contention issues to worry about, and it can just be really difficult. And it's not just having the struggle that's frustrating. Sometimes it's frustrating, and you can see it in the conversations that people will be having within the organization. So, for instance, the BI team might ask the IT team, well, where can I connect to that new JSON weblog data? We know that we have the semi-structured data. We should be able to start analyzing it. But because of these struggles to load data, it's not yet in the data warehouse, right? So those are the types of conversations that can come up because of the struggle to load data. Well, with Snowflake, we can address these loading challenges in a couple of different ways. Instead of loading your disparate data into separate systems, like a NoSQL system for semi-structured data and a data warehouse for relational data, with Snowflake, you can use the variant type column to host your semi-structured data alongside your relational data. Then you can use dot notation and standard SQL to transform the semi-structured data into any format that you'd like. So you can flatten the data if you want to. Capacity is also highly flexible with Snowflake. So if you have a situation where you need to load a very large amount of data very quickly, then you can change the amount of compute capacity dedicated to any particular job on Snowflake using what we call our virtual warehouses. So these are just compute resources and clusters that you can spin up on demand to serve those purposes. And because you can have an unlimited number of virtual warehouses, that means that you can solve your contention issues by isolating loading from the other tasks that you have going on the data warehouse. Data integration is the second struggle that we see many organizations running into. The struggle to integrate data is kind of a broad one, so there's many different ways, many different challenges that people are having with this. But one of the most important ones is making sense of data in silos. So like I was saying, if you have your data in two separate places, and maybe it's multiple places, so you may also have cloud data sources and Excel files and data in multiple different places across your organization. Well, it can be really hard to actually bring those together in a cohesive single view. Many organizations will use ETL tools or data cataloging tools to try to make sense of this, but it's an enormous challenge to find a cohesive view of the data. In the same way, it can be hard to edit and transform that data, even if you are able to kind of integrate it into one location, right? If you have data in NoSQL tools, well, those are complex. You can't use standard SQL to interact with them. And you still have to worry about contention issues while you're transforming data. If you're loading data and analyzing data at the same time as you have data transformation going on, you still have those contention issues. Now, transforming data and integrating data isn't just about manipulating data. It's also about being able to provide a common view of the business and business metrics to the people who are analyzing the data. Unfortunately, most systems today aren't very good at enabling a fluid process for changing the logic of the business as it evolves. What this means is if you need to have a place where you can test and alter the data, the tables and views that you have within your data warehouse, it's often an arduous process to then take that back and move it back into production. So it can be very hard to actually change and update the KPIs and metrics that you have in your organization to their updated format. And again, the types of conversations you might hear is a data scientist might ask, where are the updated KPIs in the sensor data tables? Where is that information that we know has changed and we know the business logic has been updated, but it's not in the data warehouse. It's not usable to the organization. And that's because there's so many challenges with integrating data. With Snowflake, we solve each of these problems in a couple of different ways. With silos, like I was saying before, if you have all of your data in a single location, then you don't necessarily need to worry about having your data in multiple places. You can store your semi-structured data in Snowflake, and you can then query it with standard SQL and dot notation, so you don't need to worry about having multiple different skill sets to analyze data in different locations. On the same token, Snowflake is completely ACID compliant, so when you have edits, updates, and deletes, unlike NoSQL tools, you're able to do those in any way that you'd like in Snowflake, and that is a significant advantage. And you also notice there's some query-based quasi-data warehouses out there, and they don't have these capabilities either. So that's a big advantage to using Snowflake, is being able to edit, transform, and use your data in whichever way you want. Snowflake also has a feature called zero-copy cloning, which means that you can take your current database or tables within your database, clone it without having to actually copy your data, make alterations or changes, and add KPIs and information to the database, and then promote it back up into production, all without having to actually move your data and without interfering with the interactions that are going on the data warehouse. Now, analytics is a very visible and important component of the struggles that we see people having with their data warehouse. First of all, queues. Now, as someone who used to spend a lot of time working on BI problems, I can say for certain that analysts are kind of always at the end of the resource priority queue. If you have data loading and data transformation occurring on a data warehouse, then often the people who are trying to analyze the data are actually put to the end of the line. This doesn't make too much sense because you would think that analytics, the visible component, the actual use of the data would be the most important. But people always prioritize the accuracy and the currency of the database over the actual usage of the database. So analysts and BI users are kind of always at the end of the queue when it comes to the resources of the database. Unfortunately, even when they do get to the top of the queue, or they're able to start analyzing their data and querying the data warehouse, most of the time the database isn't performant. It's just not able to respond to queries quickly enough, and you're often staring at a spinning wheel as the database struggles with the amount and complexity of the queries that you're asking it. At the end of the day, this can be really frustrating for the BI team because people outside of the BI team will often be asking questions like, how come the dashboard isn't working, that your BI tool isn't working properly? Well, actually, it's not the BI tool, it's the underlying database, but that can be challenging to communicate to the rest of the organization, and it's a huge struggle that many organizations have. With Snowflake, we address these problems in a couple of different ways. With queues, well, you can have independent virtual warehouses. So you have your loading and your transformation and your analytics occurring on different compute clusters, meaning that they're not contending with one another for the access to and queries to the database, or to the data warehouse. And you can also scale up or scale down to serve different analytics use cases. Analytics is interesting because it is hard to predict exactly when you're going to want to access the database. And because you can spin up virtual warehouses at any time and spin them down at any time, you can adapt to those changing use cases as you go along. And delays can also be dealt with in a number of different ways. If your delays are caused by contention, too many people accessing the data warehouse at the same time, you can use a tool called multi-cluster warehouses on Snowflake. And multi-cluster warehouses can automatically scale a single virtual compute resource to multiple clusters. If you have a throughput problem where you have all of these different people contending for the same resource at the same time, well, this can significantly increase the amount of compute available to all of those people, and do it automatically. If you're spending all of your time worrying about analytics and data integration and data loading, then you're spending a lot of time fixing problems, and that makes it really difficult to collaborate with your team. And because of the conflicts that we saw, how come the dashboard isn't working? How come the metrics aren't available? Where's the new data? If you're having conversations like that within the organization, it can be challenging to actually have good relationships between the people who are working with and cleaning the data. On the same token, even if everyone is on the same team, it can still be challenging. But often, people are actually in completely different teams. You'll have technical and business teams living in different parts of the organization, and then that leads to eventual conflicts as the prioritization of resources would be different for different teams. In other words, the IT team would definitely prioritize the loading and cleaning and security of the database, whereas the BI team may favor greater access, or they might favor being able to analyze the data at any time that they want. And between siloed teams, you also have the problem of just not knowing one another or having time to interact with one another to start solving the problems that your data warehouse is presenting. Snowflake addresses the struggle to collaborate with a couple of different methods. So, of course, if you're not spending time fixing the problems of loading and integrating and analyzing your data because you've put all of your data in one location and you have virtual warehouses to deal with these contention problems, and you can use standard SQL to analyze your data, then actually that frees an enormous amount of time for collaboration and discussion. And if you have that new time to collaborate and discuss, then you can kind of work around the problem of having siloed teams. You can start new discussions around data and build updates and additions into scheduled meetups so that you can start actually working with the team as opposed to fixing the problems with your database. All right, so that brings us to our second poll. And what I'd love to know is, between all of these problems, these struggles that we just went over, loading data, transforming and integrating data, analyzing data, and sharing and collaborating with data, what is the one that you are struggling with the most? So go ahead and click on one of those options and click Submit. Give you a second to do that. All right. Well, it looks like the struggles that people are identifying with most are transforming and integrating data and sharing and collaborating with data. And then analyzing and loading are about the same level. So the interesting thing that I see here is that everyone is having some sort of data struggle, right? But the transforming and integrating and sharing and collaborating are the two that people are identifying with most. And you know, when we started creating the 30-day plan to start ending your data struggle, we knew and kind of felt that actually those two might be two of the biggest struggles that people will be having. So the first step in actually starting to end your data struggle is all about the team. So getting the team together to analyze and think about what the analytics goal is. The idea is that if you start with collaboration and begin on the foot of kind of discussing the plan to end the data struggle with the entire team, then you don't have to solve the problem of collaboration later as you go along. So like I said, week one is all about the team. So define the team, discuss blocking issues and a place to start, and then define the scope. What actually are you trying to fix with this 30-day plan? Are you looking to load a particular data set? Are you looking to feed a particular dashboard? You know, what are you looking to do within this 30-day plan? And it's important to discuss success criteria. So if your goal for the 30-day plan is to get this challenging data set that you've been working with into Snowflake and start feeding your BI tool with it, then be very specific about what success would look like for your team. And then it's important to actually get started with Snowflake. So anyone can try Snowflake and have access to $400 in free credits and usage, which is more than enough to analyze even a very large data source for at least a month. And you can begin to do that online. The Snowflake On Demand trial is available for anyone to get started on very simply. You also want to plan some status updates going forward so that you have an opportunity to continue the collaboration you've started in the first week as you go along. So what's the second week look like? Well, that's, of course, about loading data. So you need to find data to load. Now, you may have already defined this as you define your scope and your goals, but it's important to agree as a team on the data sets that you're trying to load. And we advise that you go with an easy plus hard standpoint as you're thinking about data to load. So easy means find something that is already in your data warehouse, something that you're already working with and using, something that you know and love, right? You want to load that easy data into Snowflake so you can see the difference with performance and with contention and concurrency that you may still be struggling with even though you have that particular data set kind of worked out. And then we also advise that you look at a hard data set. So what does that mean? Well, take something that is semi-structured or otherwise, challenging within your existing data warehouse and try to load that into Snowflake as well so you can see what the experience is like with a more difficult data source. But either way, regardless of the data that you're working with, you should definitely agree as a team so that you have a usable and interesting data source to start working with. Then you want to create a warehouse. A warehouse in Snowflake, again, is just a virtual compute resource. It doesn't actually store any data, but it does enable you to access the databases and tables you have within Snowflake. So you will need that to start loading data. Then the other steps that you'll need to do in order to load data into Snowflake are relatively straightforward. You'll create a database and a table, which is just maybe 5 minutes worth of writing SQL in order to do. And then stage your data in Amazon S3 and load your data using your new virtual warehouse from the stage to the database. And all of this is heavily documented online and should only take you a relatively short amount of time to get going on, especially if you're working with one of those easier data sources that you've already got kind of figured out within your existing data system. It may take a little bit more time to work with that hard data source, but certainly would be a big payoff if it's something that you've been challenged with. All right, week 3 is all about integrating and transforming your data. So it's important to test and deploy additional business logic that you may have that you want to add on to the database or the data sets that you've already loaded into Snowflake. So talk to the team. This is an opportunity to collaborate, discuss metrics, KPIs, and transformations to add, and then use that zero-copy cloning feature that I was talking about to make a copy of your database. Well, actually, it's not a copy. Make a clone of your database without copying. Add the transformations and KPIs that are important to your data, and then copy those back or clone those back into production so that you have the data set exactly as you need it for analysis. Now, you may also want to create an integration warehouse and plan ongoing loading and transforming as you go along so that you have your data set updating over time. But if you don't want to do that at this point, then that's totally understandable. It's just something that you could possibly do if you'd like to. Week 4 is by far the most exciting of the weeks because this is when you start to see a lot of the payoff to the work that you've been doing in the previous 3 weeks. First of all, you want to create a warehouse for BI so you can avoid queues with isolated compute resources, and if you have your transformation and loading continuing to go on Snowflake, it won't contend with anybody who's analyzing the data in your BI tool. You may also want to create analytics users, and this would be kind of an important step so that you can permission the people and the administrators who are using your business intelligence tool to access Snowflake and to start using the data that you've taken the time to load and integrate. Then, of course, you'll want to actually connect your BI tool to Snowflake, and you can use Looker as an example to query your data live. And of course, you'll want to consider publishing your dashboards with Live Connect. So at this point, that actually brings us to Looker's portion of the presentation. And Nuris is going to go into some more detail about how you can take your week 4 of your plan and really disseminate it across your organization more successfully.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I dive in, I'll pull up our final poll for the day that relates to the analytics side of the data struggle. So go ahead and select the answer that kind of best describes your biggest struggles in analyzing data right now. Whether it's self-service analysis or access to data, whether it's being able to trust the results that you're getting, so data lineage, data model issues, whether it's faster loading dashboards when you have really large data sets, right? Or maybe embedding data or embedding different dashboards and reports into other parts of your workflow or applications. Give you a couple of seconds to think about that, and let's see what the results look like. So it seems like the single biggest pain point seems to be self-service access, which is certainly something that we see a lot with our customers. So we'll definitely talk about that. But also, seems like a lot of people are also experiencing data lineage, data model issues, as well as performance and loading. So how does that tie into Snowflake and Looker, right? I would definitely echo Ross's points. The data struggles that he described are something that we see every day in our customer base. Pretty much every customer has one or more of those data issues when they're coming to us. But luckily, there's really real and tangible solutions to those problems as well. So from our side of the house, it really all starts with the database. And databases and data warehouses have undergone massive kind of revolutionary changes in performance over the last, certainly over the last decade, but even if you just look 4 or 5 years back, databases used to be pretty slow and very, very expensive. And they would live in your data center, so you'd have to provision hardware and scale it and maintain it and tune it for optimal performance. And it was really hard to, adding capacity for a spiky workload would mean having to go out, buy servers, connect them, and load data into a separate server and all that kind of stuff. So not easy to do, and certainly not something that you could do for just any everyday use case. You'd really have to present a business case for that. Fast forward to today, with data warehouses like Snowflake, which obviously cloud first, they're offered as a service, and they take away really all the complexity of managing the hardware, but also the tuning and the maintenance. You're really able to scale it to your workloads in a very flexible kind of ad hoc way, and that's kind of opened up a lot of room on the BI side to really open up data access and democratize data across the organizations. But at the same time, analytics tools in the market really haven't, for the most part, caught up with the revolution that's happening on the database side. Most BI tools are architected, 10, 15 years ago, and so the basic premise is databases are slow and expensive, and we have to figure out ways to bypass, the putting load on the database. So let's figure out, how are we going to pull data into memory, or how we're going to bypass having to buy, another rack of servers for scaling a database. And what that leads to is that you really have, kind of 2 major problems that we see at Looker relating to data analytics. The first is what we call a data bottleneck. And that's a situation where you have your data centralized, you have a BI tool that kind of can speak to all that data, but it's not easy to use, and the access is kind of locked down to a data team or an analytics team or BI team. Sometimes it's one person or whole team, right? And then business users will come to them, and it's the queues that Ross was referring to. They'll come to and ask questions and wait to get a report. It might be a few hours, but easily a few days or weeks sometimes, because these analysts are usually very strapped for time, and writing ad hoc queries is usually not the top of their priority or what they prefer to be doing, in their day job. So once you get your answer, you might have gotten the answer you needed, but a lot of times you have a follow-on question. Maybe you didn't phrase the question the right way to start with, so you need to kind of ask it again. You have to get in the back of the queue. You have to wait again, and and every time you're waiting, what ends up happening is that people will only consult data for the really important decisions. But what you really want is to be able to make everyday operational decisions that are also data-driven, right? The second problem that is kind of related to that is what we call data chaos, and as a consequence, business users not wanting to wait in queues, they'll slice off a part of the data that they do have access to, right? Maybe a marketer, you pull out some data from your CRM that you can work with, you pull it into an Excel spreadsheet or workbook kind of tool to slice it there, and it feels a lot better, right? You're getting results quicker, you can work on the data yourself, but the problem arises when, as your company grows and as the number of users grows, there's really no central repository of data definitions or what the data means, where is the data stored. So you have different users creating reports that they're getting different results essentially for the same question, right? So you get into a meeting and one person has last month's revenue numbers that don't match to another person's revenue numbers, and then you're kind of trying to debug who's got the right analysis instead of focusing on what the follow-up steps are and how do you actually make decisions. So what you really want to have is, right, the best of both worlds there is having a system that affords you the governance and the standards so that everyone in the company is looking at the data through the same lens. But at the same time, having the self-service and the flexibility and the agility for everybody to answer their own questions, to be able to ask questions quickly, and to understand, what the results mean. And there's many companies that have figured that out. Looker and Snowflake have had a tremendous partnership so far, and close to 100 mutual customers. And these customers vary. Some of them are web native companies that have grown up with the internet, and their data sources are online or cloud based, and they were kind of able to figure out their stack and figure out a modern stack from the get-go, from the beginning of their kind of journey. But certainly, larger enterprises that have a long history, that have implemented, layers upon layers of different solutions, and we're still able to kind of modernize that data stack through bringing in Snowflake as the processing engine for all the data, where all the data is centralized and where it lives, and then putting Looker on top to describe that data and offer it up to business users. So what does that look like on the kind of just peeling the onion a little bit into the tech pillars that kind of make that possible? The three things are, first is that the data stays in your database, right? Looker doesn't have a processing engine. There's no database associated with Looker. We write SQL in real time to Snowflake or to the database, which means you can centralize your data and leave it in that secure, performant environment, and then just the BI tool becomes a thin layer on top of that is used to interrogate the data. This means the data is as fresh as it is in Snowflake, right? Queries are live. You can obviously cache them if you want optimal performance for some data dashboards that are used very frequently and aren't really changed much, but you have that live link into the data. The second thing is that governance piece and the data dictionary, if you want to call it that. And Looker addresses that through our modeling layer that's based on LookML. It's a proprietary language that's very similar to SQL, but it makes SQL reusable and modular. So you basically use LookML to get all of the knowledge that analysts have about the data model, how the fields relate to each other, how the tables should be joined, as well as creating new derivative fields, right, that don't exist materially in the database. You can write all of that into LookML, and then when business users create reports, Looker's on the back end writing optimized SQL for Snowflake and executing it against Snowflake at query time, which also means that as definitions invariably change, right, and you kind of want to, you might want to create a new definition that is slightly, different from your older kind of KPI. You might have, shift orders and then shift orders minus sales tax, right? It's really easy to create that additional derivative because you just reference things that are already existing in the data model. And lastly, leveraging today's technology just means, Looker's completely browser-based. There's no desktop software to install. Works on any browser, any device. There's version control for developing in LookML via Git, and obviously, 110%, API available. So anything that's available in Looker's UI, you can also access programmatically. So lastly, I'll take you just through how that modern stack looks like, right? So going from the bottom up, I'll just load the slide completely. Going from the bottom up, you have data in a variety of different sources, as we discussed. These might be cloud apps. You have different file systems, databases on-premise or in the cloud, and different APIs. So you really want to centralize all of that in one place. Snowflake makes that really easy and really affordable as well. Storage is very cheap, so you can, we have customers that query, Snowflake, petabytes of data in Snowflake via Looker, and get really, really good performance because they're able to scale that up and scale up concurrency. And we have a number of partners that we're both happy to recommend to bring data in from all these different apps. And, it's not the process that it used to be 10, 15 years ago of, it's not a project that takes a year and $1 million to centralize your data. We have partners now doing it, get you a centralized data warehouse in a matter of a week with very, very small budgets as well. So definitely talk to us if you have those sorts of struggles. But once your data is centralized in Snowflake, so you create that modeling layer in Looker, in LookML, which is all code-based, so it's really easy to change and really easy to iterate on. And so that's where all the definitions and metrics live. Looker connects to Snowflake directly via JDBC. And so once that data is in there and once it's described, then you can interact with it in a number of different ways. You can obviously use Looker's UI, and majority of customers do that. But you can also schedule reports, download CSVs and PDFs and all that kind of stuff if you want to present them or do some additional analysis. But you can also embed Looker, right? Because it's a web application, you can iframe any report or dashboard or call an API and to surface data in, we have customers using it in Salesforce, for example. So you can see kind of how your customers are using your product directly in Salesforce where you live if you're a salesperson, right? Or you could have it in Slack and can just kind of call as you're chatting to someone in real time in your company about, again, about a customer or about a product. You can just call up the data in the chat box and get the answer right there without leaving your workflow. You can schedule, email alerts and triggers if the data changes. So you don't have to, check in and log into the dashboards every day to see what's happening. If you just need the changes or be alerted when, a data field hits a certain threshold, you can just set those up. And then, obviously, lastly, a full suite of APIs, and auth and security that you would expect from this kind of stack. So with that, I'll let Ross summarize, and we can take questions after that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nurse. So yeah, after 30 days and after looking at all of these different struggles and addressing them with the 30-day plan, you should start to see some pretty significant improvements. So first of all, your team should be talking and collaborating more. And one of the things that I loved about Nurse's presentation is that it's really about the team. How are you going to solve the problems that people are having accessing data? And if you follow the 30-day plan, hopefully at the very least, right, you'll have a lot more communication between your team and you'll be a little bit more successful at working together. Hopefully you should also be able to easily load and combine your data using Snowflake and using standard SQL and hosting your data in one convenient location. You should have some accurate business logic in your data. You should have those KPIs and metrics that are so essential to your organization right within your data warehouse. And you should also be finding more insights. So I think that comes without, it's not too much of a surprise to say, but if you're using Snowflake and Looker together, it's really a powerful combination for finding significantly more insight in your data and disseminating that information across your organization. Now, that brings us to the end of our scheduled content, but we would love to discuss with you any questions that you may have. We'd love to go into detail on anything that you're curious about. But, we'd also love for you to join us if you have the opportunity for our live demo program that happens every Thursday. So if you want to see Snowflake in action and see us actually using Snowflake, please do sign up for that. It's available on the Snowflake website, snowflake.net. So with that, I think that we can start getting into some questions. So we have one for Nuris. How do I get data into Snowflake and Looker? We use Salesforce, Marketo, Zendesk, and GA, Google Analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a number of ELT partners that help load data into Snowflake, where they can then access it with Looker. So, companies like Fivetran, Stitch, Talend, Matillion are all great options. They all obviously, vary a little bit in kind of what the use case, depending on what the use case is for you. So definitely shoot us a note. We're happy to follow up with you as well after the webinar, for your specific use case. But they all support all of these or most of these data sources, and then new ones can be built out very quickly. I have seen, customers get set up in, sometimes on the initial demo call, so in an hour, but certainly, within a week or so, and have the data in Snowflake where they can then model it in Looker and get started with analysis.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the question is kind of focused on cloud tools, but there are also many different types of data. And there's another question. Someone said, you assume all my data is in databases. How is the data integrated when it is not in a database engine, like Excel files, for example? So that's a great point. And as Nurse was saying, there's many integration tools that we work with to get your cloud data into Snowflake and then onto Looker. You can also load files into Snowflake manually as well. So a great example is if you've got a bunch of CSV files, well, that's a pretty standard set that you can easily load into Snowflake just even through the web UI in Snowflake if you wanted to. You can also do it programmatically. And then I think the other standard question that many people often ask is how Snowflake deals with streaming data. So you can't stream data, directly into the table with Snowflake, but you can do micro batching where you load data into S3 and then copy it into Snowflake on a regular cadence. And so we have organizations that are loading data, on the order of every minute or every couple minutes into Snowflake using micro batching. So that's kind of how we deal with streaming data that you might have coming in through Kafka or Kinesis or whichever tool. Okay, let's move on to another question. So if a company has not identified all of its data sources and systems, do you help identify and figure out the BI and data warehouse solution within the 30 days plan? So yeah, I think that's a good point. And actually, I think it's I don't know, maybe a little naive to think that we'd always know exactly what our platform is going to be in full context, because things are constantly changing. But Snowflake and Looker are a fantastic combination to choose as kind of the heart of your analytics platform. And so, yeah, within your 30-day plan, it's really important not necessarily to identify all of the systems and tools that you want to use, but to have a really strong foundation to work from. And of course, we believe Snowflake and Looker are that foundation that you can work with. And then we have a fantastic network of partner integration tools and statistics providers that can help you to extend what you're able to do with Snowflake and Looker. Nurse, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I would also say start small, kind of, and to Ross's point in the presentation is figure out, one or two or three use cases that you acutely feel, that you're struggling with and that you really want to get insight into, and start there, right? And figure out what are the data sources that you need to pull in to make those happen. Put those, centralize that data. Build out the dashboards, build out reports, give access to your constituents, and then get that feedback loop. And then usually what will happen, or what we've seen, is other teams in the organization or people that have other use cases for data will see that what you've been able to build, and they'll come to you, and they'll usually know what data sources that they have, and then you'll be able to build from there. So don't be afraid to kind of start small and then expand from there. I don't think you need to have every single data source mapped out when you're starting out.
Yeah, I agree. I think the most important thing that I feel is in the 30-day plan is just walking away with a success. And it's important to to take the attitude of incremental improvement, because there's always going to be new data sources, new analytics use cases. And so if you're able to kind of, I suppose, work through individual problems over time and constantly deliver some improvements, then, as you look over the course of months and years, you'll have this huge change in your organization. But, it's delivered incrementally, and that's totally okay. All right, so it looks like we're through the questions that have been asked. We'd be very happy to answer and respond to any other questions that you have. So feel free to type them in if you have any last-minute ones. If you have questions about Snowflake, you can find information on snowflake.net in addition to our free trial and also our product demonstration. And then, Nuris, what's the best way to reach out and learn more about Looker?
Yeah, so we run free trials and free POCs for all of our customers. So feel free to just sign up at looker.com/demo, and somebody from our team will reach out, schedule kind of a 30-minute call to go over your needs and figure out kind of where to start.
Okay, so actually we do have a couple of more questions that have come in. Gentlemen, I just have one last question to ask. It looks like a few folks are asking about HIPAA compliance, and this one can be asked for both of you. Are Looker and Snowflake HIPAA compliant?
Yeah, so good. That's a great question. So we are a certified data partner, I believe is the term for it, meaning that Snowflake could not be HIPAA compliant because we're not actually dealing with PHI as an organization. However, organizations that are using and storing and dealing with HIPAA data can use Snowflake to store that data. We are a certified business partner for HIPAA data, and you can I suppose you can take your HIPAA data and put it into Snowflake without concern.
And Norris, any final comments on that question?
Yeah, so similarly to Ross, Looker also signs BAA agreements for HIPAA customers. Actually, one of the joint case studies that we have in the materials section is a healthcare customer called PDX. So feel free to definitely check that one out. Looker's architecture is such that you can deploy it anywhere. It's a jar file, so you can put it in your environment where the data lives. So no data is actually leaving that environment that you've already secured. Looker can obviously also host Looker for you, but most of our kind of healthcare customers will just choose to host Looker themselves, and in which case, the Looker's just writing SQL in real time and is not actually pulling any data out. So that's not a concern at all.
Right. Yeah, and I should also note that Snowflake is also SOC Type 2 compliant, and we continually are working on different certifications and most importantly on the security of the system so that people can always trust the data that they're placing into Snowflake. Okay, so one question for Nuris that just came in. This person just asked, how is Looker different from Tableau or Power BI?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And I won't go detail into each company, but if you kind of think back to the three technical pillars of Looker, so by far I think the biggest differentiation why customers come to us or would switch from Tableau or Power BI is the modeling layer. So because in Looker you can define the model in one central place, and then every report, if you change a data definition in the modeling layer, every report that depends on that definition or flows from that definition will automatically update, right? And that's simply not possible in workbook analytics tools, and Tableau and Power BI are not the only one in that category, because kind of they're kind of like individual spreadsheets, right? So you would have to go in and manually update each one where that definition has changed. So we've had customers that had something like 3,000 different reports, and with Looker they're able to control and govern that data from one central place with very little kind of maintenance work. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Norris. And we'll go ahead and wrap up today's webinar. And again, if we haven't been able to address your questions directly, we can be happy to follow up with you over the next couple of days. And again, we'll be sending the recording of today's presentation around so you can share with your colleagues or listen again if you like. And I just want to thank our presenters, Ross and Norris from Snowflake and from Looker. And we'll go ahead and wrap up. Have a great day, and thanks again.